Bonjour.
Hi everyone. For this session, it's about training, innovating, entrepreneurship. It's quite hot, and thank you for being with us this afternoon. The objective of this session is to focus on the world of transformations. How can we manage them? To train, to innovate, to undertake. So it's a circle. We need to train people so that they can work in companies. We need to embark upon technological innovation. People should be trained on innovation. So this topic is at the heart of a changing world that is transforming itself. I'm delighted to have all of these panelists. Before I hand over the floor to the different panelists, I will tell you that I'm working in the US, in charge of training, innovating. So it's a kind of ecosystem that works well, and it was a production method that was used in Switzerland and in other countries. Training, innovating, undertaking. So in my university, there's a high number of teachers. There are some subsidies for school fees. The company or the university produces copyright. So there's a campus with lots of companies developing some technologies that are engineered by the engineers, and there are some students who are trained on these technologies. So this is the tip of the iceberg, but it works well. This is an approach that works well, and France should work along the lines of this ecosystem, because in France we don't have this ecosystem. So this ecosystem is not developed in France because decision makers are a bit ignorant, and we don't have such an ecosystem in France. And higher education issues are very often sidelined, and that's a pity. We're under the impression that the United States is different, but Switzerland did it. I mean, BFL, the Polytechnic School of Lausanne, I mean, they started from scratch, and this school is at the cutting edge of training international elites, and they created lots of companies on the campus. So it's possible to have the same ecosystems in France. I just wanted to lay the groundwork and talk about my experience. But now I think that we should give a floor to Navi RADJOU. Is familiar with the Silicon Valley and the English universities, Indian universities. He will explain to us about this circle. So training, innovating, undertaking. Hi everyone, I spent 13 years at Silicon Valley, then I worked 3 years at Cambridge University in the UK, and I've been studying the innovation ecosystem in India. So I have 4 minutes ahead. I will be talking about the different ecosystems. I will describe the power, the firepower of each ecosystem, and I will identify some unique idiosyncrasies of these ecosystems. And then in the second part, there will be a Q&A session. So Silicon Valley is based next to the Stanford University, founded by an entrepreneur, 1885, Stanford, Mr. Stanford. From the very beginning, this university was imbued with an entrepreneurial spirit. It is called the entrepreneurial spirit, l'université entrepreneuriale, training entrepreneurs, but there's a specific DNA, entrepreneurship-driven DNA. Then in the 1940s, Frederick Terman, a professor, created the Silicon Valley. He was a teacher, a professor at Stanford. He was the father of the Silicon Valley because he encouraged students and teachers to create their own companies, and it was a revolution. So he created one of the first labor pool, the first industrial park, and the rest is history. So I will pinpoint the unique specific features of Silicon Valley. So it's a place, it's an ecosystem whereby innovation and entrepreneurship are intertwined. And those were born from entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship didn't come after. State support was significant at that time. In the 40s, in the 50s, in the 60s, there was a funding mechanism. The industry and the military provided some funding, and they invested in the military equipment, and they invested in space equipment. And there was a Cold War with Russia, especially in space. The tech for tech was not the mindset of Silicon Valley. There was another idea, the purpose, contribution to a national destiny. This was the driving force of Silicon Valley, and Silicon Valley has been able to reinvent itself. Silicon Valley never rests on its laurels. Until the 1970s, they specialized in communications and infrastructures when they focused on laptops and computer businesses, and then they branched out to software, and now they are knowledgeable about new technologies. For Cambridge, Cambridge was created 60 years ago with Cambridge Consultants. Cambridge Consultant was a consultancy designed to convert the academic ideas into value creation for the industry. It was a bridge between the academic world and the world of corporate practitioners. Then there was an ecosystem of startups. You have lots of startups. You have 13 unicorns that are based over there. Venture capital investment has increased twofold since 2017. This ecosystem got 1.5 billion worth of pounds. So there are different characteristics in Cambridge. You have a multidisciplinary approach because you have lots of experts, expertise in biotech and electronics and artificial intelligence. When you combine all of these fields, you come up with new disciplines, biocomputing or bioengineering. Second, since the 1920s, Cambridge has given the possibility to professors to keep intellectual property following their inventions. And I will talk about India. For Silicon Valley, it took 80 years to develop itself. So in India, we have 25,000 tech startups, 100 unicorns, and that's quite impressive because if you consider the Indian ecosystem, it moved from softwares to services, something unprecedented. The whole ecosystem starts with hardware, software, and then services, but they moved from the hardware business to the software business. And there's something significant about India. I'm a Franco-Indian. When you are an entrepreneur, it was a taboo a few years ago, but today this is a job that is well valued by society. I will give the floor to Dominique RESTINO, the president of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of the Île-de-France region. So what about innovation? What about training? And what about entrepreneurship to train, to innovate, and to drive entrepreneurship? This is our ultimate purpose. This is our DNA, and this is why we work. This is our modus operandi. We have a school. We have the Chamber of Commerce in Paris. It's a public establishment with different employees. So we support corporate creation. We support companies in terms of innovation, but we have an educational segment that plays a key role. And we have another section, congresses and trade fairs. So a school was created. We created the school. The predecessors have been created the school. In 1881, we trained 38,000 young people as part of an initial training program. We trained 30,000 people on the job training. 17,000 people are trained as part of apprenticeship schemes. It's an hybrid system. It's an important asset as part of our business activities. In addition to that, we have a section called congresses and trade fairs. We need to train, to support, to coach people, and we need to make sure that companies have boost their sales. So we have the we are the third operator of trade fairs and shows, so that companies can show their products and services. This is the ecosystem of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Île-de-France region. So we have 12 schools. HEC was created in 1881. So it's a higher school of economics. I mean, it is said that the situation is great in the US, but in France, the situation is extraordinary. So Mr. Papin, I mean, he created the entrepreneurship section 40 years ago. ESSEC, it's another school within the fold of the Chamber of Commerce. It is the first school in terms of training that has decided to implement apprenticeship back in 1873. So the Chamber of Commerce does innovate with the subsidiaries. So we undertake. Entrepreneurship is part of our DNA. We've been innovating for the past 2 centuries. From time to time, people will say that we are like an old lady. No, not at all. We've transformed ourselves. And this is the theme of the Rencontres Économiques. So we need to transform the world in management, business schools. The Gobelin School was ranked the best movies animation school in the world. It is in France, and it is within the fold of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Paris, Île-de-France. We are the main stakeholder, and we import, we export, or rather, students at an international level. So I said, by way of introduction, that the higher education system in France was lagging behind. But it doesn't really apply to business schools. I mean, there are lots of business schools, I mean, that are performing quite well. Okay, right. Something that I wanted to clarify. 3 entrepreneurs who would like to share their experiences and experiments. So they will explain to us what continuous training is all about, redeployment. How is it possible to innovate in terms of skills? How can people be trained? So, Mr. VAISSIÉ, you are at the helm of International SOS. International SOS, it's a company that was founded 30 years ago in Asia, and over the years it's a global company, an international company, and we have secured a foothold in 90 countries with 90,000 employees. Most of them are white collars, doctors, security, safety specialists, or logistics specialists. So lots of people who are well trained. The #1 problem is how to entice them, how to attract them. So Unemployment is an issue in France and in the US as well, and across the world, but also in the UK. So it's very difficult, to recruit people in some countries. So we need to attract people. In order to do so, it's important to be equipped with a mission, values. You have to demonstrate that CSR is key. It's a linchpin, especially for people who want to move into the company. And it's important to strike a good balance between your private life and your professional life. So it's important to attract people, and the company needs to rejig its structure, hybrid work. People can work from home, people can work at the office. So it's important, to work on values. And in terms of values, sincerity is key. In terms of training, companies or people joining a company and people who stay in the company, they want to feel that they've made headway. So what are the different steps and stages in order to make sure that people can get a good career path? And how do we make sure that people are personally satisfied? So we have some e-training modules, mentoring, personal sponsorship, personal mentoring. Different offers are being made so that people can study in the MIT school or others. But at the end of the day, innovation should be nurtured because the world is changing at breakneck pace, and I think that the world will speed up. So the business model has to be altered all the time over the past 30 years. We've had 4 different business models. So 30 or 40% of your turnover will be devoted to another business proposal. So this is what we did during COVID. So we had to care for all the workers, not only mobile workers. Moreover, training is key. I created 2 schools in London, a high school and a university. We have to make the most of the systems. You have the Anglo-Saxon system. People will be knowledgeable in English, and teamwork is key. The involvement into the community, and you have a French side, critical mind, skills, and other skills. So when you create this model, France will be on the winning side in the future. Thanks a lot. Alexandre VIROS, you are the manager of ADECO. You will be talking about continuous training or on-the-job training. So I will move away from MIT, Cambridge, and I will talk about blue collars. It's important to train blue collars. Blue collars are very often forgotten. The ADECO group, 600,000 people work for ADECO, and we train people to the tune of 140 million euros. So that's very important. Along the lines of what you've said, there are some changes. There are some significant changes from one business sector to another. There will be new emerging sectors. We'll have to find skilled people, productive people, and within the same business, within the same industry, within the same position, people have to beef up their skills, to change their skills. So people will tend to think that training is for the jobs of the future, but I can tell you that today's jobs are being transformed by technological developments. A forklift driver works differently now. For a given position, skills are obsolete after 2 or 3 years. And if I were to make a parallel, a printer was not an augmented printing copyist, but I think that in our country we need to learn to work, and we need to work, but at the same time it's a learning curve. So the second point that I would like to highlight regarding the skills, we tend to think that in our country, in a society where degrees are pivotal, so once you've finished your education, you've been able to tap your skills, and that's over. No, it's a flow of skills that you will acquire and that you will renew all along your life. So we've talked about upskilling, reskilling. It means transforming your skills or acquiring new skills. It's a change of mindset. So our education system, as you've said, was designed taking into account Charles Péguy and Top Gun. So you choose the best in order to come up with an elite unit. You will get the Fields Medal, and the rest is jettisoned. And if you consider the blue colors, we need to focus on vocational training. What is important is to look at apprenticeship. We need to help people, to support people, to accompany people. So you've talked about the Anglo-Saxon world. The soft skills are full-fledged skills, and we can build on them, especially when you are a blue collar. Most of the time, blue collars will think that what is important is the position and not the skills. So we need to spot the soft skills. It's a kind of personal heritage that you will nurture, that will provide a yield, and you will be able to move from one sector to another. There were some people working on the assembly lines, and we used some methods, and through these methods they were able to do some fiber optics, and they liked doing some minute work. So you can move from one sector to another, from one industry to another. So if we want our country to be innovative, we need technology, but we also need training. And if we want to achieve this objective, we need to consider training not as a cost, but as an investment. I was in charge of digital companies. For me, it was easier to make IT capex instead of training. Of course, we got the tax credit for research, and there should be some tax incentives so that the blue collars embark upon a trajectory of progress. Thanks a lot. We'll be revisiting those topics. Thanks a lot.
Donc, Madame Neila.
So, Neila BENZINA, I think you're going to be talking to us about retraining or upskilling throughout your life as an entrepreneur. Thank you. I'm an entrepreneur in data and digital in France and Tunisia. I work in Europe, in Northern Africa. And I've been very active in associations that bring together digital stakeholders, the biggest ones, French Tech, Raison Entreprendre, amongst others, not just in digital, but on other topics. And we made some observations. People who were in the task force, some of them are here in the room, and we made some observations. And amongst them, we saw that there was a huge lack of skills in new technologies regarding topics where there's a huge growth potential, where companies are suffering a huge turnover, a big brain drain, a large departure from Africa to Europe, but also from Europe to the US. There are also profiles that exist that have, with a certain skill set that doesn't necessarily correspond to market needs. And we see that the profiles that have already been trained are all positioned, placed, and the companies fight to get this competent staff. And on the other side, we have profiles that could move to this market, but that don't have access. So we believe that in this case, we need to increase the skills pool. We need to fill the bathtub and look for the profiles that are the closest to the market to begin with, by giving them access to these jobs. So we looked at the PhDs in math and physics who were unemployed graduates. We trained them on a platform, and we brought them to the labor market. We started with a cohort of 30 people in Tunisia, and they were all hired. They all found jobs. They were unemployed graduates who had at least 2 years of unemployment. So this reskilling, to use this chic term, can really change the life of people. And on the other side, for companies who benefit from well-trained staff, in addition to that, they find people who are motivated and happy to be there and more committed than some of their other employees. So there are several boxes that we're ticking at the same time by working this way. We created the Holberton School, which is a new type of school where teaching innovation is at the center and at the heart of the learning process, based on a platform with coaches and teachers. It's the school that trains in IT engineering in a very accelerated manner, in a pragmatic manner, also based on projects, peer learning also. In the soft skills skill set, we include peer learning. Thanks to peer learning, we can teach people to get prepared for the working world. No one in the working world is going to come and give you information. You need to work together as a team to progress, to learn more quickly, so that teamwork can be as effective as possible. So we teach them this from the benches at school and in their learning process. To conclude, we teach them how to present projects. We teach them to promote and defend the projects that they've worked on, and to project themselves in a career where they're going to have this posture in an organization, so that they can then join companies where they will be ready in terms of soft skills. We've developed a platform to equip educational institutes such as universities, schools, and companies to be able to upskill and reskill their employees. In the challenge of training today, there's lifelong training and training differently. And the topic today is training and innovating. For us, innovation is at the heart of our training process. We include teaching innovation. We train the employees of an organization on a platform so that they have the ability to self-learn. They can do self-correcting exercises. There are also online sessions, virtual classes, to be able in this way learn at their own speed and evolve in the right way and maintain their level on certain topics, which is always in line with market expectations. So we asked ourselves, is innovation important? Some people don't necessarily want to use technologies. Are they that essential? But yes, today, even more so post-COVID, we see that we cannot get by without a minimum of IT knowledge and skills. With digital data, even if we don't become a specialist, nevertheless, you need to have a certain level of knowledge and skills in this field. So using platforms and means that make it possible to acquire this knowledge and these skills in an accelerated, efficient manner is a good idea, in my opinion. To finish in the value chain, we train people who are retrained. We also propose the platform to universities and schools. We didn't have it running during COVID. It started before COVID, but with COVID, we saw a quick growth. But we also position people, and we cover the entire value chain, because at the end of the day, we have people in positions in companies, be they high-tech companies or not. So people who can bring a solution to the labor market. Thank you very much for these inspiring examples. To conclude this first part of the round table, so I'm going to, Thibault LANXADE is going to be signing his book later on today, and he's going to talk about employee dividends. We train people so that they continue to be productive in companies, but I think we have to give them more profit sharing in order to generate a collective spirit. Thank you. As the head of a company, my first topic today is to recruit, motivate, and create loyalty. My company has 2,000 employees in different countries, and this is a topic that we deal with daily: recruit, motivate, and create loyalty. When I recruit employees, the first thing they ask is the quality of the project that they'll be working on. So the presentation of a project in the short and medium term, the training they'll have, the quantity of learning that they'll have in their field of expertise with the projects that we organize. If I have the wrong project, I can't recruit them. The second point is the quality of the team. The quality of the project is interesting, but what team am I joining? And number three, we hear the company component. What is the framework promoted by the company? Is it a full remote? Is it on site? What conditions will I be welcomed under? And the new point for us, which is company responsibility, it's local and territorial anchoring, the values of the company. These are topics that even just a few years ago were put on a wall in a meeting room or shared during a Works Council meeting. But now this is something that we have to express dynamically. We talk about pay in the last point. For pay, I want to say that that's criteria number one. If they're not asking for their wage, it's the prerequisite condition to work in the company. So we're in a tense condition. They know what they're worth on the labor market, not less. They can ask for more. The salary is usually not a topic. It's usually the last point we address. That's not quite true, because they know exactly what they're worth. But what is new now, and our message is we want to share value better. For this, we need to innovate. We have pay. And on the sharing of value, when the company can achieve significant results, is the sharing fair? And today, in a new type of capitalism, we have to ask questions to attract these young people. We're the only, in France, where we have major dividends to shareholders paid out that causes a problem. Look at what happens between January and the annual meetings in June. All of the companies that pay out big dividends are systematically attacked. Look what happened at the annual meetings of major companies. Demonstrators put them in the minority on a lot of questions like wages. So a company that needs to innovate, needs to train and support. There was a proposal made by the French president in his campaign, an interesting decision for employee dividends to have a better sharing of value. This sharing of value was embodied by the Général de Gaulle in 1967 on the ordinances on wages, and I think we can go further and modernize this 50 years later. It's our ability, our capacity to attract people into the company. When a company pays dividends, they also have to have profit sharing for employees. This is essential, and it will continue to be essential if we want to recruit people into the company on the basis of better sharing of the value. So I'm going to ask a question now to go around the table again. So there are difficulties in getting people to change positions. It's hard for people to learn and learn new skills. Should the state be doing something, and if yes, what? Not subsidies and financial incentives. It should be something else. But if I call on your creative nature, what's missing? What could work better in terms of incentives for reconversion and constant training? So recruit more professors. In France, we have a very rigid public management of teaching in higher education, and in companies we can have access to talents coming from everywhere. But for universities and secondary school, it's not the same case. This is a problem for different languages, mathematics, science, engineering. We really need to bring in more professors. And we need to differentiate pay scales. Today we pay the gym teacher and the math teacher the same way. I think we need to create strong synergies, tangible synergies between companies, educational institutions, and policymakers, because the speed of innovation and the taking into account of innovation and new ways of working are not the same. You talked about professors. In order to prepare the professors of the future to this new teaching method and learning method, they must be able to work with educational institutions that may have already adopted platforms so that they can see that on the ground their jobs aren't threatened, but they will be able to position themselves as augmented professors, allowing them to focus on what's essential and provide real comfort in the teaching methodology. And at the same time, policymakers must create a favorable environment, bringing together these three entities with common way of working could create a real change in the country. I think this is really essential that we have this type of synergy created. This is something that we do a lot in our schools. We have to have an alliance strategy. Today, it's impossible to succeed alone, to really succeed. And it's always better to set up alliance strategies, and sometimes with competitors on projects. When I talk about an alliance strategy, I could give you some examples. We have an engineering school called BENZINA, also from the Chamber of Commerce in Lyon. And in the program, we work with the University of Marne-la-Vallée near Paris. This is what allows us to find financing to run innovative projects. This gentleman's on the INSEC supervisory board, and we set up programs together on research and on methods to support the transformations of these programs in schools. And I think we're not going to be able to change everything overnight. There are diplomas. We're a nation of diplomas. We work more now with titles, with training, hybrid training. So we need to tend towards this. I don't think we should be either or, we need to be both .com. I'm not going to talk about taxes anymore. I've already came out of the closet on this topic. I think we need to accelerate the reform of the VAE, the validation of acquired experience. It's a great idea, but it's too often impacted by bureaucracy or even just the time it takes to organize a jury. I'm talking about what I know, but quite distant from MIT and Cambridge. But I think a lot of things can come into play here because we have skills in the workplace, in factories and shops. So when people say past years don't create competency, that's wrong. We have a reservoir. And I think we need to accelerate the reform of this VAE process, the validation of acquired experience. There's an important topic we should address. We have 600,000 to 800,000 jobs open in France. They're jobs with qualifications. Some of the qualification could come from the CFAs, from the training agencies that could work with apprentices in training. This training is delivered by companies. It's at the heart of what companies know, and it leads to immediate employability for the people leaving the training centers. The competition between the schools and the CFAs is no longer the same. A lot of progress has been made, but we need to continue to optimize to guarantee the employability of young people on jobs that are maybe not very attractive, but that pay well and are. Just a few words about English. Even in unqualified labor, speaking English is a real advantage. For instance, in tourism, they're often non-qualified. If you speak English, you can get a job immediately and you can reach the top of the system. In France, we are lacking English skills. It wouldn't be that complicated to catch up. We really need to improve our level of English for employees and students. That is true. We've been talking about this for a long time. I remember my children, when they were in primary school, they were getting English lessons, but it never really took off. So the question on continuous training and apprentices, etc., what is the responsibility of the school? What is the responsibility of the CAE, the Apprentice Training Center? And what is the responsibility of the private sector? Today, through the reform of professional training, a lot of private companies are creating these CFAs, these apprentice training centers. At the Chamber of Commerce, it's in our DNA to train young people. But there's another issue, it's public policy. In public policy, we need to take certain things into account. Today we have France Compétences, where we're lacking a bit of money to begin with. I think we need to fill the coffers, and the President of the Republic announced that there would be a contribution of 2 billion of the 5 billion that are missing. But there's also the problem of co-contracting. In order to train people, young or not so young, the cost price exists, and when the public pays for this investment, an investment in training, if it's not at the cost price, it could be a problem. We've managed to have 700,000 apprenticeship contracts, and during the pandemic, to ensure that we continue to work with these young people arriving on the labor market or who are going to soon join the labor market, this was a real advantage. And this financial support of the government was great. But in future, there's a co-contract that in some big cities, with real estate costs, with the cost of teachers and infrastructure, it's not the same in different places. So once again, if we have a single vision, a single path, a single truth, we're going to head straight to failure. There isn't a single truth ever. There are always several truths. And through alliances, through experimentation, this is what you were talking about earlier, Leila. There is experimentation in all big organizations. We need to transform. The right to try, the right to fail leads to creativity, and it helps us meet needs. But you asked the question, what can be done with respect to the public authorities? We have a line that says when you support all the way. We have structures that can be running deficits, and that's just incongruous. I wanted to share two good practices that came out in COVID and that were not very present in the news. The idea of sharing competencies and training, ongoing training. It's what we call the sharing of savoir. During COVID, there were some companies that had underused staff, whilst others needed staff. So the concrete case I mentioned yesterday, Be Open, the biggest producer of masks in France beside Angers, they needed an industrial site to boost production. In 2020, there was a huge shortage of masks. So the companies in the territory around Angers lent their employees that came from the automotive sector and other sectors. And when they went to work at Be Open, they were trained for a few days. So they were trained for free, trained to do something they didn't know how to do, and then they applied their talents to other things. So it's this idea, you talked about the different actors in the ecosystem. Maybe it's up to the companies to work together as a network and share their competencies. This is starting with emerging platforms, the sharing of employees or the sharing of skills. This is developing in the territory. And then I have a second message that I think will develop and be a problem for companies, for recent graduates. In English, we talk a lot about the Renaissance men, people who have a lot of skills. When we put them in a job, they do one single thing, though. And they feel that they have other talents that are being forgotten and never used. What happens then? Deloitte, the consulting, associated itself with a freelance platform called freelancer.com, the biggest worldwide, and they created a type of work market on this platform. I'm a Deloitte consultant. I'm an expert in the automotive industry. But there's another project in England where they needed skills around mathematics, and you see, okay, I've got skills in this field, so I can have a double personality. That's important because in my mind, the employee of the future will try to be multi-purpose, and that's a great way of looking at talent. They'll leave you otherwise. They'll say, I'm very good at what I do, but I can be good in other fields also. We don't really know that ourselves. So having access to the platform, yes, it does help reveal talent. I wanted to say that there's a very interesting initiative that was carried out in Tunisia called ELIF, and it makes it possible to train young technicians in IT to reinforce their training with a lot of soft skills and contacts with the field, with entrepreneurs and companies, to make sure that these people understand what's going on in companies and then become fully operational as soon as the additional training is over. But not only. We then later added an entrepreneurship brick with an incubator called Zodot that uses the multi-purpose character of our profiles who want to undertake, who want to come up with new things. And we also want to bring them into contact with companies that could recruit them while giving them the possibility of being an entrepreneur later on. So innovation in the way we manage the learner's pathway, the student's pathway, and the second chance that we give them is really vital and will help create loyalty and give a second chance. I'm going to try to conclude. Just a quick word about learning. We've made a lot of progress on learning. Professional education is more linked to companies than it was in the past. And the companies have a responsibility in this upcoming ambition. The ambition of reaching 100% learning. We shouldn't have any high school student or technical school graduate that only has academic training. The reason they switched the professional sector is because they didn't like academic schooling, or that they like technical schooling. Be careful about that. I talk a lot to my Swiss and German colleagues who tell me every time 50% of the CEOs in France come from technical training. That's not the case yet in France. The first stage is to make sure that they all have contact with the company. The level will go up, more will become bosses, and little by little, the sector will grow in value. But the aim is to say that we can become a manager by taking the technical or the academic route. So I think we have 30 seconds left. You asked a question, what can the state do? But ourselves as heads of companies, we need to work with these younger generation that thinks differently. So we also have to be in a learning system in companies. It's not always up to the state to do something. That's a great conclusion. So it's up to civil society and not the state. I like that conclusion. Thank you for coming and having shared your ideas. And thank you to everyone in the room.